Cause you fill my mind, oh, you fill my mind. We could build a dream, start up something new, and the world is on your shoulders, and you feel like falling over. Just let me in your head so I can be there for you, there for you. I go anywhere, anywhere with you, cause you fill my mind, oh, you fill my mind. We could build a dream, start up something new, and the world is on your shoulders, and you feel like falling over. Just let me in your head so I can be there for you, there for you. When I need you, won't you sing for me? Won't you sing for me? Feel with all it's me.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to VC Masters. My name is Nick Pallavito. I will not be your host today because this is kind of a new show, and we're going to explore the world of venture capitalists. So we need people that are expert in this area, subject matter expert. So we're going to bring in a gentleman who actually teaches this stuff, knows this stuff from Duke University, and has been involved in more than 125 startups and venture capitalists. And that's none other than Dr. Salman Azhar. Dr. Azhar, welcome to your show, and you're going to be the one who's leading the charge with VC Masters, because I've talked to a lot of people about it, and I said, you know, my problem is I know very little bit about the world of VC, so maybe you can help introduce people to the world of VC. And also you'll have some guests today, so this will be very interesting. So we're going to be excited to listen to it, and I'm sure our viewers, not only in the United States, but around the world, will also be interested in what you have to say. So take it away.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for having me. And as far as the show is concerned, I'm planning to focus first on the secondary market. A secondary market is when you buy shares from an existing investor. And the reason that secondary market is so hot these days is that funds in the United States had a 10 to 12 year lifetime, and they had to divest and or sell, I should say, and give money back to their investors or LPs during this time. Due to COVID and then due to high interest rates, the IPO market was frozen for a while and then has slowly opened up. But there's a huge backlog of companies that is out in the secondary market right now. And we capitalize on that by saying to the funds that, hey, we will buy your shares at a discount. We'll give you the money now. So we solve your liquidity problem, and you can then give this money to your investors or limited partners or LPs. And our value proposition for our investors or the new investors is that we will give you discounted shares. Now, to kick off this show, or the series of shows, I have invited David Frazee. David Frazee is a rock star in this area. He has been part of Richmond Global Ventures for the last 10, 12 years. Before that, and still he does a lot of training for entrepreneurs. He is the person behind a lot of the curriculum that was developed for Endeavor, which is an organization, a nonprofit organization that fosters entrepreneurship and trains entrepreneurships. He also has his own curriculum on demystifyingsiliconvalley.com. I don't know how he does all those things, but he knows a lot more about secondary markets than anybody that I know. So that's the reason I chose him. So welcome, David. Good to have you here.
Yeah, pleasure to be here.
Lovely. So, I'm going to kind of like really go deep into this and go to the good, bad, and ugly of what we see there. So I'm going to start basically why Angel and Venture Global in Silicon Valley style has become kind of a tool for economic development and how it has fostered innovation and entrepreneurship. So tell us a little bit more about your experience in Silicon Valley, of how that came about.
Yeah, well, there's sort of three phases from my perspective. There's the embryonic birth of what we now know as Silicon Valley in Northern California. There's the spread of it through other technology hubs of the United States, like Boston, Northern Virginia, Austin, Texas, and other places. And then there's the global spread. And interestingly, the global spread isn't so much places like London, Berlin, although Berlin's now a hotbed. It's emerging markets, places like Buenos Aires, Ho Chi Minh City, Mexico City, places you wouldn't, if you were looking at this 40 years ago, wouldn't have expected entrepreneurship to take off. And what's amazing about entrepreneurship is it is the single, in my view, greatest anti-poverty tool ever created. It is the opportunity for anyone to put their vision into the world, to look at problems not as insurmountable obstacles, but as things to solve, as challenges. And around these opportunities came what I would consider a very highly scientific toolkit that all the top venture funds now use, including ours, that allows people anywhere to be able to replicate rapid growth, exponential scale startups, even in hard markets. So I started working almost as an aside in emerging markets 25 years ago. And at the beginning, it was a historical accident, but you start working with one government on innovation policy, then suddenly 24 other governments call you wanting to know, how do we replicate Silicon Valley here? And one of the greatest untold stories in the world today is the rise of exponential growth, venture capital style companies all over the world, and the hundreds of billions of dollars of revenue and that's being created, the tens of millions of jobs, and just the growth. I mean, it is literally changing GDPs of regions and countries, changing families, changing entire economies. It's the underreported story of our time.
Definitely. So tell us more about the current challenge of liquidity in the markets, particularly how it's impacting the Series A investor.
Yeah, well, let me tie these two stories together. So my fund is Richmond Global Ventures, and our thesis is to invest in global opportunities, usually with some, angle about transformation of the economy in a sector or geography. And we do half our deals in emerging countries, and we do it through the Endeavor Network, which you alluded to earlier. The co-founder of my fund, the other managing partner, he actually founded Endeavor. And so I did a lot of education. He was the founder. We decided this is the network we really wanted to leverage. So we have the combination of both the emerging markets as well as early stage. We try and be the first check with conviction. We invest $3 to $5 million at a first Series A, ideally. And so it's old school with conviction. It's not like an app. It's something transformative, like data analytics for national security or the credit scoring system of an entire country in Latin America. That's the kind of stuff we like. The way in which I grew up on venture capital is we would be able to invest in a company at the Series A. And for those who don't know, there's Series A, B, C. There's no reason why you have to call it that. It's just kind of convention. And basically after Series C, you'd be able to go public or be acquired. And that often was a 4 to 7, maybe 5 to 9 year process. Well, a lot of things have changed. IPOs for a while were 10 to 12 years, and now they're more like 13 to 17 years. Like we're in a deal that's way over 15 years at this point. And that's become the norm. And it's become the norm for a lot of reasons. There are very big checks that are written by like SoftBank and Fidelity and Wellington. Like we had a company that would be public under any regime 20 years ago that just did a $400 million round at a 4.1 billion value. And they'd be public if they did this in the 90s or even in the early 2000s. So IPOs are being delayed. And there's also the backup in the IPO market, which you talked about. I'm told from my friends in the industry of the investment banking world that there are over 400 SEC registration statements backed up in confidential registration. We don't have exact numbers because it's confidential, but those are IPOs that need to get out, should be out. Venture capital is a hydraulic system, meaning pressure goes in, pressure goes out. Pressure in this case is money. If I go raise money from a pension fund or a family or a high net worth individual, as you said, I have 10 years to give that money back. So I have to invest in an entrepreneur, grow that entrepreneur, and then harvest that entrepreneur. And one thing I will tell entrepreneurs is if you don't want to exit, meaning go public or be acquired, you don't want to be in the venture game. We don't look for private, profitable, long-term plays. That's not our asset class. We grow you and then we slaughter you and you get rich too. So it's actually a good system. The problem is when we can't exit your company in that time frame, our investors are mad. Like I will tell you, we have 10 deals, 4 of which are unicorns. That's great. It's 40%. Previous incarnations of our fund had like 30%. So we are one of the funds that consistently does well. But I don't have exits to show my investors, and we're not the only fund like that. So not only do investors who would invest in more Series A investors not have money, we don't have money to reinvest. So I see incredible business deals all the time that I can't invest in. The Series A economy outside of maybe artificial intelligence is effectively dried up right now. Good deals are not getting funded. Good entrepreneurs are not able to find as much capital. And when you look at numbers that say venture is growing, you got to break that out by round because the big late stage rounds are, but the early stage Series A again, exclude artificial intelligence, which is the new buzzword, is effectively dried up and desiccated. And that's bad for the economy because good ideas are not being funded right now. It's bad for the economy.
So tell me a little bit about how your limited partners or the investors that have invested in your fund feel about this.
It's I always liken, Schrodinger's cat. It's alive or dead. You don't know until you open the box. We have Schrodinger's value. Like I tell them every quarter what I think our fund is worth and their investment's worth. But until the money comes out, it's a 1 or a 0. It doesn't mean anything until they see it. So, on the one hand, people are thrilled to have, the companies we found, but going into 10 years, not having any liquidity back is tough. I mean, a lot of things have changed. Sometimes it was like, the family patriarch's money and he's passed away, or maybe they were in a real estate deal that went bad and they need some money back out, or they were just counting on seeing it. So it's, it's a love-hate thing. And I have the same for the companies, by the way, because I look at some of my companies and I have companies that are literally transforming an entire segment of science or human understanding. And it's impressive, but I'm also like, why aren't you public? Why can't I, because I rely on this too. I mean, most venture funds, there's a small management fee, but the real money comes in the profit share. So it's a love-hate relationship with the asset class right now. We're thrilled and proud, like many funds, to have found great companies, but it's enormously frustrating to say, look at this piece of paper that I can't spend on new investments or my mortgage payment or other things. I mean, liquidity matters in the system. Book value, it doesn't mean a whole lot to people.
So does it affect the founders of these companies also that have been in this in 10 years or so?
Yeah, I mean, founders are really hurting right now. So a lot of people, there's some new changes that have happened in just my time in Silicon Valley. Like it used to be, to do startup style work, you had to take a startup salary, which could be $150,000 to $180,000 a year, which turns out isn't that much in Silicon Valley, especially when your friends are making $600,000 to $800,000 at Google plus stock, right? And any good founder could be doing that. You now have the rise of large scale technology companies that are public being able to offer startup-like environments with public compensation, which is competing with us and making it hard. Plus, it's difficult to stay the course. So, I have a good friend, I'm not going to name his name, but I'm good friends with the founder of a soon-to-be unicorn. He's one of my favorite founders. I wish I could invest in him bluntly, but, we're tied up, as I said. And he's like, my girlfriend's mad. She wants to get married, but she thinks we can't because I don't make enough. I'm on a startup salary. And so he's literally sitting on a company about to be worth $1.1 billion at the next financing, but he's still making these low wages. And so, compared to his peers. Now, the payday will come, but he has the same issue. And, you have, in both early stage investors, like seed investors, A investors like us, and for people like my friend who are the founders, there are people who will buy shares off of you, but it's predatory because there's so little money for it. So people will offer you maybe 20% or 25% of what it's really worth. So if it's worth $1 a share, here's 20 cents. And some people are desperate enough to do that deal because they need something, but that's not a good system because you don't want an inefficient market where people are hurt for sticking. You don't want people hurt for conviction. You don't want people hurt for dedication, for being there. And there are partial solutions where sometimes investors, like at the Series C stage, will buy out a little bit of the founder shares, but that doesn't happen that often. And I think it's bad for entrepreneurship also because if founders get discouraged and don't want to sign up for this longer slog, we lose innovation. I mean, look, innovation anywhere is progress everywhere. So as a world, we lose when someone doesn't innovate. And that's not good for anybody. We want people encouraged to play this game.
Yeah, I'm also thinking that if you sell any of your shares at, let's say, 25% of its value, doesn't that damage the valuation of the company as well?
Yeah, that's actually something everyone faces. So, everyone gets audited, because we have auditors, companies have auditors, at least after a certain stage. True startups generally don't get audited for a few years, but eventually they do. And so the definition of a fair market value is what a willing buyer, willing seller would pay. So it's hard to argue we're a $1.4 billion company when you just sold the shares at a valuation of $300 million. I mean, that it's easy to say I have people eat money out, people are desperate, but the canonical accounting answer, at least, is the fair value isn't 1.4 billion, it's the 300 million. So you have this weird dichotomy between the market comparables, what it actually would be worth if it were public today, versus what you can get on the secondary market. And it's not a true secondary market. One thing that I hope people appreciate is if I go buy stock in Apple or Microsoft, it's a very liquid market. I mean, there's lots of buyers, lots of sellers, there's lots of depth, there's lots of people over the world that can participate. Private company securities are very different. There's only certain people that can play in the space because of what's called accreditation standards. There's securities exemptions the US puts in place, and every country has its house rule on this. So you don't have everyone playing. It's not a deep market. It's not a market with a lot of volume. It's inefficient. And so people can be predatory just because there's so few players. I mean, they just can. Not many people are doing secondary offerings. And that's a real gap right now that should be filled. And it would be better for our venture economy if it were filled, because it will encourage more early stage investors to do it, to invest in more companies and more founders to enter the game. I mean, it's discouraging right now to say, would I really give up a $600,000 offer working at Apple to go do a startup that could take me 12 to 15 years, making a quarter of that, and I'm stuck in the meantime? That's a very, I mean, the upside is nice, but the truth is most startups don't make it. So if you're doing the analysis on that, we're driving people out of the entrepreneurial economy. And again, from my perspective, because I see this as the most potent tool we've ever developed for progress, that's bad for all of us. That's not the incentive set we want.
Yeah, and also in the startups, you have to work a lot harder. In some of the big tech companies, you can have a job where you just check your email and in fact, sometimes not even check your email, just mark it as read and just move.
Yeah, I mean, those jobs unfortunately do still exist because I have at least one friend who has one like that. So startups, you can't get away with that because the pace is too fast and there's too much that has to be done. But we've created through our own success, disincentives to what made us successful. It's like we're killing the goose laying the golden egg, and that's not what we want to do.
So tell me a little bit more about the secondary markets. What kind of discounts are you seeing? Because I'm seeing, reasonable discounts, especially if I'm invested in the company, and if I get it at too good of a discount, sometimes, it has the same effect as a down round. So I don't want my investments to be facing a down round, which is getting funded at less than your market value.
Yeah, and that's actually another issue is when you have secondary sales below the last price, the people who paid that price are now mad because, well, why did I pay $1 when these people are getting it for 40 cents? There's a lot of constituencies in this ecosystem here and a lot of room for people to get upset. Plus, secondary money is not money going to the company. So there's that issue as well. But I've seen discounts. I'll tell you a story. So at the beginning of the year, we had a few of our limited partners just said, hey, it's been a while. Congrats on the unicorns. Can you get some money out? Sell a little bit of some of the bigger positions that we have. Keep most of it, let it ride so we can get some money off. It'd be nice for us. We have needs for cash. And I'm like, fine. So I set out naively on a quest I thought would be simple. Maybe we'd take a 15% discount, maybe 20, that's about it. And people were offering 80% off, 70% off, 65% off. And that's all we could get offers. So we didn't pursue those sales. So that doesn't make any sense. And I thought maybe someone just didn't like us. So I talked to our co-investors because we know the other top funds in the world and we do the same deals. And they had the same issue. Like one of our friends was doing a $6.5 million sale. And it took them forever to get a reasonable price because there are no buyers out there for that. And so that's why I started to see this is like a problem. And, exploiting a crisis, there's two ways you can look. There's two ways you can look at a crisis. Like you could say, well, I'll take advantage of the crisis and buy it to 20% of fair value. But the problem with that is you're not getting the good stuff because no VC is going to sell their best company. Well, I'll try and get my dogs offloaded to you. But if I'm your friend, I'm not going to give you my best deal at that. And when the economy turns, you don't have a relationship with those people anymore because they're going to remember you exploited them. And the thing about venture most people don't appreciate is how close the community is, how much we all know each other, and how it's what we call a multi-turn game in game theory. Like I don't just see you one time. I'm going to see you lots of times. And we stand more upside. We gain more upside by having long-term relationships. If I help you in your moment of crisis and non-exploitive, like I give you maybe 25 or 30% off, which you're actually thrilled to get because that's a huge price increase over market. you'll remember me in good times too. And if you look at venture, it's not a bell curve, it's a power curve where the very few companies are the most valuable. So getting one good outlier opportunity is worth more than a dozen mediocre companies, truly. So you want the best funds, you want the best deals, and you rationally should pay something closer to the approximation of fair with a reasonable discount for illiquidity, because you can't just go sell it tomorrow. You should have some discount, because over the long term, you'll make more money. And that goes back to something about venture capital I don't think most people really appreciate in other parts of the world. When I started doing education in like 2000, 2001, actually late 90s in China, if you count that, and people couldn't understand why we took minority stakes and paid so much in value to the founders. Like, why aren't you taking 90% or at least 51%? You should always have control, and you should underprice them. And venture doesn't do that. We may take 20% of a round for like $5 million. And it's like, why would you do that? Well, the reason is we get rich by giving upside to the earlier investors and the founding team and the management. And this is an example of that. Being less greedy makes you more money. Trying to squeeze people in a zero-sum game is counterproductive in venture world, because it's a power curve, because you're trying to find the outliers, because you're trying to create the incentives for exponential growth. The way in which business is done in retail, distressed asset, land, real estate, like those models don't work in venture world. And one of the painful things to watch is the transition in emerging countries from all the money where people came out of the banking world and traditional business world into venture. And you see that in other parts of the United States right now. Like, you have people who literally don't understand venture killing the incentive set by trying to be too greedy. And that's counterproductive. I remember there's an investor in Buenos Aires at a program who yelled at me and said, y'all are stupid in Silicon Valley because you should be taking 90%. And, I said, no, Sequoia, Kleiner, Mayfield, like all the funds that made Silicon Valley back in the 80s and 90s, they're not stupid. They got rich beyond God. I mean, they made tons of money because they align incentive sets for innovation, which is different than people who are just cogs in a machine.
I was just talking to a PE investor who wanted 51% controlling stake in anything that they invest in. No. And, if they don't know about the business as the entrepreneur does. And if I'm an entrepreneur getting a minority stake, and this guy who doesn't know the business is telling me now what to do and controlling me, I would just leave.
Well, selling 51% is the same as selling 100%. Fun fact, because you're trapped. It's a bridge to nowhere. I mean, this may not translate to a global audience, but we used to have TV commercials in the US, like Roach Motel. You go in, but you don't go out. Like, you're now stuck in this company where you don't ever have a chance for exit. You don't control it, and it's a bridge to nowhere. Like, you've sold the whole company. Just, you've got to have price for it. So don't ever do that. Because if you're entrepreneurs listening, don't run from that stuff. But that's it. Alfred Hitchcock once talked about acting talent in the movie industry. He says actors are cattle and should be treated that way. And a lot of investors treat entrepreneurs that way. And that's a mistake. I mean, the best funds are very pro-entrepreneur. Like, we're not giving them fudge for breakfast, like small, like we have discipline and rigor and process, but we give them economic upside. We give them the tools to be successful. We decentralize authority. We do all the best practices to create innovation. It feels like dark magic to the outside, but it's actually a highly orchestrated process and set of tools we use that anyone can learn. But one of the key hallmarks is incentives to the innovation and talent. If you don't do that, you might as well just take your money and put it in the stock market. Like, put it in the S&P 500 and get your 10.9% annual growth rate. You'd be better off.
Yeah. So I don't know about you, but if somebody offers me 80% discount either on the last round or their fair market value, I'm going to question whether this company is going out of business or the fair market value is not computed correctly. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely signaling. They're like, what do you know we don't? Like, I can't remember one of the years the Nobel Prize in economics was awarded to the guy who studied lemon laws and lemon cars. Lemon cars refers to cars that have some hidden defect or damage. The reason why the used car market is depressed is many cars have hidden defects. It's asymmetric information. The seller knows the truth. Is it a good car that was well cared for, or is it the engine is about to go out, but the buyer doesn't know. And so anyone who's buying a private company which doesn't have public disclosure obligations is like, what do they know? if they're selling, there must be something damaged about this. Now, a reasonable discount wouldn't draw a question because that makes sense. You can't just go sell it tomorrow for cash. So you are locked up and there's a risk it could go down. But when it's too discounted, it starts to look, it's too good to be true. And people don't believe too good to be true because everyone has the experience of being in one of those asymmetric lemon situations. Like I bought a lemon thinking I was buying a diamond, and I don't want to be stuck there again. And that's another problem with this is that, the bottom feeding has made it harder for the good investors and the good buyers to do deals because they've mispriced things and make it all look damaged. I mean, the thing that's hard to understand to outsiders is there are incredible deals that will be deca unicorns, like, $10 billion or more that you can get for a discount. And there's nothing wrong with the company. What's wrong is a market inefficiency. They're backed up from IPO, so they expected to be public in 2022, 2021, but they're not because of the backup. And so they're not doing anything wrong. And they're still growing. Like we have a company that is growing, from like 160 last year to 260 this year million in revenue to 525 million next year and 875 million the year after. And people will only pay like a severe discount for that. And like literally the thing's growing like wildfire. So that's the kind of, when you have dearth of capital, it's signaling things that aren't true. And it's hard to articulate to people who aren't accustomed to this asset class. So it's market inefficiency. It's just market inefficiency.
So, David, I have a plot twist at the end because I really brought you here as a guest to sell you this Sharpie. This Sharpie is something I bought for $1,000. Now that it is a VC used Sharpie, the fair market value is $2,000. And I'm willing to sell this to you at 80% discount for $400. So hopefully you'll buy this Sharpie.
Well, the difference with a Sharpie is its future enterprise value, like the sum of its future cash sums is negative. So it's a depreciating asset, and venture it shouldn't be. But it's actually a good analogy in one way because what makes venture capital companies interesting is you're investing in future growth and upside and economic productivity, whether it's network effect, market domination, whatever. Like Amazon lost money for 10 years to become one of the richest companies in the world because they were building a natural monopoly of distribution channels and analytics. But most investors will see it as the Sharpie. And if you go back to like Amazon, there are talk show interviews that you can still see on YouTube clips, floating around where Bezos would go on a show and be mocked mercilessly about losing money. So people saw him as a Sharpie, as a depreciating negative asset, when he was secretly building, at least for the smart money, one of the greatest companies in the world. And so most people see a Sharpie and think Sharpie, or most people see a startup and see a Sharpie instead of a future Amazon. And that's kind of the magic is which. Because by the way, there are bad startups too.
Well, you can see the show on Amazon Fire, by the way.
Excellent.
Wonderful. So any parting thoughts, David?
There's lots of things we could talk about, and maybe in the future we can talk about global innovation, making innovation available to decrease poverty in the US, using these same tools in NGOs and nonprofits to have exponential scale impact because human suffering is real and we should care about that. But with regard to secondary markets specifically, what I would say is, there are permanent trends and there are temporary trends. Temporary trends are like the IPO market backup. That will pass. I think this feels like 1997 to me, which I lived through. So both 97, 98, 99 for the next few years, which means a lot of IPOs will happen. But then, March of 2000 will happen because these things are cyclical. So that will be fixed as we see more, less friction in the IPO market. But some things are permanent. So the big late stage rounds are fairly permanent. They're not going to go away. So we will always have situations where huge behemoth companies are going to be able to raise $400 or $500 million. And so we've changed without realizing it, the profile of the economics of venture investment. And one of the key attributes is the founders and the early stage investors who are like the early stage investors were player coaches. We create billion-dollar companies, and our incentive set just got whacked out from under us. And no one's talking about it. No one's understanding it. And this is going to have decades-long repercussions. So we have to solve this problem if we want to keep this kind of innovation edge that we've had, that we've developed, and it's become this enormous engine of global growth. I mean, it's a rattlesnake coiled up, ready to bite, and no one's talking about it.
Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your experience so authentically today.
Thank you.
I go anywhere with you, 'cause you fill my mind, or you fill my mind. We could build a dream, start up something new, and the world is on your shoulders, and you feel like falling over. Just let me in your head.